It is safe to say that the case against Karen Reed is fraught with controversy, with a polarized Canton, Massachusetts community rallying around both sides in this case. It all started on the evening of January 28th, 2022 at 34 Fairview Road. The home was owned by Nicole Albert and Nicole's husband, Brian Albert. A party had gathered there that night following a night out of drinking at the Waterfall Bar and Grill, nominally to celebrate Brian Albert Jr.'s 23rd birthday, to which John O'Keefe and Karen Reed were both invited. By 6:30 a.m. on January 29th, 2022, Jennifer McCabe placed a call to a 911 operator reporting that she, Reed, and another friend named Kerry Roberts found O'Keefe's body in the front yard. The trial has entered its fourth week in a case that has been going on for nearly 2 years, and there still hasn't been a cause of death released. There is also a great deal of reasonable doubt about how the police handled the crime scene. Michael Proctor, the state trooper in charge of the investigation, was friends with everyone inside the house at 34 Fairview Road, yet no one was ever questioned. Here to discuss this case is retired Massachusetts State Trooper Todd McGhee. I'm Collier Landry. Let's get into it.
Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in Richland County history. Dr. John Boyle is accused of killing his wife, Maureen.
The 12-year-old son finally took the stand.
As I heard a scream, I heard a thud. It was about this loud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
I decided at an early age that our trauma should not be what defines us. It's what we choose to do with it that does. I'm here to offer my unique perspective on mental health, true crime, society, and popular culture, and albeit with a slight sense of humor. I'm Collier Landry, and welcome to my show. Mover Nation, wherever you may be and however you may be watching or listening, thanks for making me a part of your day. This program wouldn't be what it is without you, so thank you. If you would like to financially support the show, I have links to that stuff in the show notes and description of today's episode. For all our Patreon and YouTube members, our next members-only meet and greet is this coming Sunday, May 26th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. If you are a paid member of the Patreon or YouTube member platform, it is open to all members. So come on out and say hi and meet other Mover Nation members. By the way, I have a very special guest here with me today. Well, two very special guests, but one of the furry kind. Come here, sweetheart. Since last time on our live, Marisol decided to destroy my amplifier downstairs. She has now made her way up to have her little playpen in my studio, and she gets to be here while we do the show. So hopefully she will be quiet and not destroy anything else, which is, it's kind of funny. But here she is, and we all love her very much. And you'll get to meet her more on the meet and greets. It's never a bad idea to show dogs, right? All right. Okay. Mover Nation, let's get into today's episode. So Todd McGhee is a retired Massachusetts State Trooper, and after a successful 24-year career in public safety, he provides international training and education for the U.S. Department of State Office of Anti-Terrorism Assistance. He also contributes to mainstream media, providing insight and analysis on homeland security, active shooter, aviation security, and school security related topics. Please welcome to the program, Todd McGhee. Hey, Todd, how are you?
Doing good. How's everything?
Everything is great, man. So, wow, this, you have, as a former Massachusetts State Trooper, you have a very unique perspective on this Karen Reed case. And, as I was telling you previously, I've done a lot of research on this, but there are so many people that seem to be so polarized on this case. I've never seen, well, maybe outside of the Trump trial, I've never seen people gathered with signs and chanting and trying to have like marches and demonstrations in support and against a particular defendant. I mean, I don't remember this, at least in a very, this is like a localized trial, right? This isn't a national event. This isn't, O.J. Simpson or anything of that nature. This is a local trial in Canton, Massachusetts, right? What has made
Very much
this what has made this so crazy and so polarizing for the community?
Right from the onset, Collier, this case got massive attention, not just from our local media, but again, it's spilling over nationally into the national media attention. And what's interesting about this case is that you have a police officer that was found dead, not in the line of duty, right? So we see these different incidents that happen where maybe there was an ambush, maybe there was a officer involved shooting, maybe there was we just had an officer that was killed recently that was working at a traffic detail and was hit by an excavator. So the death of a police officer isn't uncommon, but the fact that Officer O'Keefe was found on the front part of the property of a residence in Canton, and allegedly the girlfriend Karen Reed in this case has been identified as the perpetrator. So very, very sharp attorney from the West Coast is here joining us in Massachusetts defending Karen Reed. And some people describe him as flashy, but I would say he's doing his job. And Karen Reed is getting fantastic counsel in defense of her allegations.
Well, I got love for my West Coast people representing in Boston. I wish the West Coast people that are representing in Boston would have been the Los Angeles Lakers,
Oh,
but
well,
unfortunately,
maybe next year.
hopefully next year. Yeah, your lips to God's ears. I'm not going to hold out a lot of hope. I've seen the competition in the Western Conference. Okay, so this lawyer, this high-profile, flashy lawyer, comes in to try to seemingly, get his client off. Now, one of the things there's a lot of things that stand out to me. One is this timing, and this was something that was just covered in the Jennifer McCabe testimony. I believe she testified on Friday, and then yesterday, and then she was grilled today by the defense. Something about Googling something, and I love how they, the people just jump on these forums and just jump all over people for making mistakes. But I believe the question that she asked Google is, what was it? Haas long to die in cold was the message. I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but it is, there's coming under this, this scrutiny of like how she typed this. And for any of us that ever typed a question, I literally, it was autocorrected. Karen's Reed's name was autocorrected on our thumbnail today to REID for hours, and I just noticed it probably an hour ago, and I thought, it autocorrect. Oh my God! So I had to change it. These mistakes happen, but that was another great launching port into this. What is it that the defense is really trying to set up and insinuate? Is that she is somehow responsible for O'Keefe's death?
So the defense has done a tremendous job of connecting all of the players, anyone that was at the party, anyone that was in the house, anyone that was at the Waterfall restaurant for the birthday celebration prior to the after party. So the defense is really trying to show some type of bias before the jury. And keep in mind, the proof of burden is on the prosecutors. Karen Reed in our democracy, in our criminal justice system, does not have to prove her innocence. So essentially, the defense attorneys need just one juror to cast a shadow of a doubt. And that's enough either for a mistrial, which means the case can be tried again. They'll go out, they'll select a new jury and retry the case. Or it could result in a not guilty, a guilty, and then what most people don't understand is the other factor of not so much a mistrial, but a situation where neither innocence or guilty has been established, but the prosecution cannot retry.
So there will be no double jeopardy, as it's supposed to be outlined in our Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Sixth Amendment.
That's correct. The due process, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
due process.
14th Amendment due process.
Exactly. Okay, so and somebody was commenting here about the timing of the Google search alert, and I believe there was a few of them. It was at 2:33 a.m. that it was at 6:03 a.m. I think the defense was showing these, and then the messages were erased as well. But Also, at the crux of this case, there's been no cause of death established. Is that correct, or is that just conjecture that I'm reading?
Well, the medical examiner said that the cause of death is not consistent with a vehicle, a collision with a vehicle. The cause of death, as we see now, is head trauma. And we know that Officer O'Keefe had 2 black eyes, but there's also damage to the skull. So I've been a expert witness in depositions for use of force, police conduct, police misconduct. And I always say there's a side of the witness or the defendant, there's a side of the plaintiff, but there's also the side of the medical records. The medical records tell the story. If Karen Reed impacted Officer O'Keefe, John O'Keefe, with her vehicle, there should be other damage on the body that would be visible somewhere on the upper torso, somewhere on the arms, some other bruising that would be in connection with that type of injury or that type of trauma received by the body. So again, I believe that the defense is going to go back to the medical records. That tells the independent story. It's absent of bias. It's absent of any type of feelings or emotions, pro or con. It just tells the story. So I also think that there's more information that can be found on the computer of the vehicle. Just like in a plane accident, we want to find the black box. Well, there's information that we can glean from also the car computer. Was there a high acceleration in reverse at a specific designated time? Was there a sudden and immediate stop after that acceleration in reverse? So we really need the forensics of things to come back into this testimony to really shed some light.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because there's all these apps now, and I think I was riding with somebody the other day, and I stepped on my brakes, and she said, "Well, if I had this app, my app would ding me, right?" You see the Allstate commercials and stuff like that. But this is one of these things that's coming into play more and more. It seems in these cases is not only the phone, but the cars that are computerized, and they have these, unbeknownst to me, these black boxes that can show exactly what you're talking about, the acceleration, deceleration. I mean, you were a state trooper for 24 years. Talk about how that technology has changed and so rapidly.
Part of, along with the technology is just reverse engineering, thinking about what the crime scene is, thinking about the information in the form of evidence that you have, and just reverse engineering what's plausible here, what could have happened in this situation. And if you come up with gaps, or if you come up with some type of puzzling piece that you cannot bring some clarity to, well, you haven't landed on any type of causation. So, those types of things, along with the technology of the vehicle, I'm even thinking about Ring doorbells. Did any of the neighbors have a Ring doorbell that could be gleaned that we can get some information from? So, the eyewitnesses have been interviewed. There'll be more coming in the days and weeks ahead, but there's still a whole forensic side of this case that really hasn't been explored yet.
Well, you just said in the days and weeks ahead, right? We're 16 days into this trial. How many weeks is this thing going to go on for?
It's interesting because we still have the angle of Trooper Proctor. We don't know where his testimony is going to land. That came up in the last 24 to 48 hours in testimony from Karen McCabe regarding her relationship and how many phone calls to his wife. So again, Canton as a community, it's a small community, and it's one of those communities where a lot of people, you might not know them by name, but you know them by face. Very tight-knit, very close-knit community. So the fact that all these people, Boston police officers, state troopers, civilians, they all know each other. They all spend quality time with each other, birthday parties, summer cookouts, all these different things. This community is pretty tight. So that's the job of the defense, is to be able to try to show any type of bias in this investigation in order to cast that reasonable doubt in the minds of at least one juror.
So were people originally, so was it originally a thing where people were on Team Reed versus Team, well, I'll just say Team O'Keefe? Was that the thing? Was their relationship, as far as you know? I mean, I believe there was some testimony talking about Karen Reed had maybe some potential jealousy issues with his past ex-girlfriends. I mean, that seems to be standard fare in relationships, right? You don't like the exes, and it is what it is, right? But it doesn't seem like they have a contentious relationship.
Some of that testimony is coming out, and that's a job of the prosecution trying to show motive. But by and large, you have a community that when this case finally became polarized, you did have people picking and choosing sides. And you had people that are close to the Alberts, people that were close to the O'Keefes. They want justice. They want to know and have someone brought to justice for the death of John O'Keefe. Now you have the media that weighs in. You have the speed of social media really pushing the conspiracy story. And as we can see, our communities and our public safety system, there's a division across the country. You have a lot of people speaking out against public safety, and if there was some ill doing or if there was some type of planting of evidence. I'm not following those conspiracy theories. I think there's a story that's going to reveal itself, or if the story is not clear and concise, it's going to lead to a mistrial, right? It's going to lead to possibly a not guilty. But we have to let those things play out. There's there was testimony today that how some of the witnesses are being harassed. I don't subscribe for that. Let this thing play out. These people, their very quiet lives have been disrupted by this whole case, and we need to let both prosecution and the defense be able to do their jobs and let justice take its course.
Well, I know for one, they can't blame Whitey Bulger, right? So this won't end up being The Departed.
Out of the picture, absolutely.
So, okay, so so as far as the prosecution is concerned, and as far as this evidence coming out that there's this what is the officer Michael Proctor, who is the state trooper. I guess why? So in California, for example, like I got into a car accident right years ago, and it was on an off ramp. So I was coming off an off ramp, and somebody blew through a red light and just nailed my car. But the highway patrol literally stopped at the exit ramp. They're like, "This isn't our jurisdiction anymore. We saw you get off in the off ramp," because they were just happened to be right there, and they made sure I was okay. But they're like, "We're not getting involved in this." How does a state trooper get involved in something that happens on private property, or is that something that happens in Massachusetts? I don't know.
Similarly here, we have a little more latitude that in your scenario, your personal scenario. If I pulled up behind you, I would book the accident and from there follow through insurance, what have you. But let's talk about this scenario regarding the state police involvement with this investigation.
Yeah.
Not uncommon for an outside agency, and I don't want to give superiority like local, state, federal levels of jurisdiction. However, it's not uncommon for an outside agency to investigate an incident involving one of the department members, and for no other reason than what we can see in this case is a potential conflict of interest. Here's the rub. In this particular case, the state trooper assigned to this case knows all the players. He knows everyone inside the Alberts home. He knows the cousins. He knows the community. So when that case was assigned to Trooper Proctor, the due diligence should have been, hey, boss, I know who these people are. I've got a long time familiar relationship, like a couple of decades long time, and it might be better for another trooper in the office to handle this investigation. Simple, clean, move on, and maybe we can get rid of 20% of the drama that's involved in this case.
Yeah, I believe Michael Proctor's mother is quoted as saying, "People in the house were like a second family."
Pretty tight.
So was John O'Keefe a member of the state police, or was he a member of Boston PD?
Boston Police. I believe he was a 16-year veteran.
Wow. Okay. And did he have, one of the things that I look at when I look at this case, it just strikes out to me is, well, it's Boston. First of all, it's Boston. I mean, how far away is Canton from Boston? I'm not reaching here, right?
Oh no, you're talking a suburb of Boston,
Okay.
30 minutes south of the city.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I'm in Santa Monica, so I'm like, so like I'm still Los Angeles technically, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to make sure I wasn't reaching, but I'm looking at just even the timeline of they're coming from a bar, they're going to a house party. I read that even the police in there, when they were gathering evidence, they were gathering red Solo cups up. Has anyone brought up the fact that there was a lot of drunk people involved in this? I mean, apparently Karen Reed was, when she had to be sedated and taken to the hospital. Apparently she had said something to the effect of, could I have hit him? Could I have backed into him? Like trying to rationalize. I think when you go through something that's very traumatic, right? You're trying to figure out, could I have done something wrong? I probably wasn't in the best frame of mind. Has that come into play at all?
It has. In what was interesting, the defense attorney, Karen Reed's attorney, went back to the depositions from 2 years ago and questioned the context of that utterance. Did I hit him, or I hit him? And then they repeat it 3 times. So Karen Reed's position is, one, I never said that, those utterances, but those who testified in the deposition did not make the statement that it was a declaration that she confirmed the impact of vehicle to body of John O'Keefe. What's interesting about this particular case with the Solo cups, and again, all due respect to my brother officers in Canton, Massachusetts, Canton PD, but shoddy police work here. The cross-contamination of body fluids is a very real thing. That's enough to deem something inconclusive once it comes back from the lab. The evidence bag. Yes, evidence bags are paper bags, but in this case, it was a Stop and Shop bag, which probably had other items in it, which could, again, cross-contaminate any collection of evidence. Also, the Solo cups and the paper bag, the Stop and Shop bag, was not sealed. So now you have no tagging and no sealing to keep the chain of custody of the evidence intact. So again, defense doing their job, they're going to punch holes all into those scenarios.
So okay, so hold on. We don't have Stop and Shop here in Los Angeles, but maybe Ralph's or a 76 station or something. I don't know. Okay, so basically they use a grocery bag as their evidence bag.
Yes.
So if I'm
labeled as such as the local brand,
if I go back to my days of consuming intoxicating beverages out of red Solo cups, which is probably going to take me back to my college days, but I could conceivably see a bag and be like, oh, I'm just going to throw it in there. I mean, so the cross-contamination feels like somebody could use that as a trash bag even, and it has nothing to do with this. So
in my house, we use them as recycling.
What's that?
In my house, we use those same paper bags as recycling.
Exactly, right? So is it not conceivable that there was a lot of drunk people here, and that even maybe the police officers that could have shown up may have or been in the area, maybe were part of this, because obviously it's a big event that was going on. It's the kid's 23rd birthday. They're all connected. Everybody, I mean, is there any, I mean, not to degrade anyone or to shame anyone, but could they have been intoxicated too while trying to work on this case, gathering evidence?
Well, I can tell you this, that the expediency of the investigation by the Canton Police Department, it would have behooved them to slow things down. It was a snowstorm that night into the next morning. There was evidence that may have been covered by the snow. Slow it down. Allow the state police to come in. We have a whole division that's called Crime Scene Services that are experts at collecting. So that evidence being covered up with snow, it wasn't going anywhere. So their job should have been secure the crime scene. Wrap that yellow tape that you're very familiar with around the house, around the property, wrap it around street signs, stop signs, hydrants, whatever it is, for you to be able to contain that area to keep from people walking through it or from any potential cross-contamination. That's a basic 101 part of the investigation.
I'm sitting here talking. There we go. Mike's muted.
Okay. All right.
I have a mug. Somebody got me. It says "Oy vey." I always say "Oy vey" whenever I'm muted. But one of the things that strikes me is, as I was saying, is that not only this cross contamination, but the fact that she's charged with second-degree murder, and that's one of the things that like are the prosecutors reaching here, because doesn't second degree murder require some sort of malicious intent, some sort of malice, like I'm going to kill him, I want to kill this son of a bitch or whatever, and this appears to maybe be more of a if anything involuntary manslaughter. If she backed her car into him and wasn't paying attention, or maybe she was intoxicated and wasn't paying attention, or what have you. Why such a severe charge against her?
That's also come up as part of the criticism. Has the DA gone far in the charges? Currently, it's second degree murder and also manslaughter. There could have been motor vehicle homicide. There could have been something else within a statute that would have been a lower charge. I think the fact that Officer O'Keefe, being a Boston police officer, may have had some weight in the charges, but I don't believe, even if there is a guilty, I don't think it's going to reach that level of second degree murder. The manslaughter charge is there; it is in place. So again, that's probably closer in line, if there is a guilty verdict, as to what the jurors could settle on. But again, there's a lot of information that's already come out in this trial. Honestly, Collier, I don't think we're even halfway through this case.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And I say that because of the forensic side. There are more, you may have Canton police officers being called back to the stand. You may have the family members of the Alberts coming back to the stand for more questioning, and then cross and then redirect and all the other things. And then of course the forensic elements of the case. So there's still a lot of information that needs to be unpacked.
It seems like it's how one of our audience members, Layla Dakota, asks, how does a case with that kind of major issue in the crime scene investigation even get charged at all? What does that process look like in terms of referral from the police to the prosecutor?
Yeah, so therein lies, you have a situation where, again, you're waiting on information from the medical examiner. Medical examiner's decision is going to have some weight on if the DA is going to take action or not. Then you have to look at the evidence that was collected. Can the evidence that was collected support the charges, right? So there's a chain, there's a certain process that's at play here. So from the position of the district attorney to not take out charges, well, then how did this man die? So, it maybe there's another issue of optics, which may be part of an argument here, that a high profile case, because it's a death of a police officer, outside of the performance of his duties, that's something that is kind of a provocative case not to bring anything forward. So there's a lot of factors at play here.
Absolutely. I'm just noticing something off topic. Is that a Purple Heart behind you?
That is my dad's Purple Heart. My dad was a two-tour veteran of Vietnam, and my wife gave me a wonderful gift and framed one of my father's pictures and put all of his military medals encased in the picture frame behind me. So, and the flag next to that was presented to my mother when my father passed away. My father was also a police officer. So his agency presented that flag to us in honor of my dad's service. So very proud to share my father's tremendous history in military and police service.
And you were a veteran as well?
I did not. My father's experience from Vietnam, he said, "You're going to college." And so I spent those years in college instead of in the military.
Well, we appreciate his service and we appreciate you honoring your father. Just thank you for that. And also now, speaking of Boston, so what is the Gronk is in the commercials where you get the insurance if your father, if your people, if your parents served, do you get the lower insurance rates now because of that? Just kidding.
Everyone gets lower insurance rates except for Gronk. So as a commercial show, but I think Gronk is busier now than when he was a tight end. He's everywhere.
He is way busier now than he was a tight end. For those of you who don't know, Rob Gronkowski was a tight end for the New England Patriots, who won 5 million Super Bowls in the last 20 some years, and quarterback by the greatest of all time, Tom Brady. I'm a big fan. All right, so getting back to KK has a question. Have you worked with any of these troopers mentioned in the trial so far? You can answer that if you want. If not, I totally understand.
No worries. I retired in 2011, so I did not get a chance to work with any of the troopers involved in this particular case. But I will tell you, we're not as big as LAPD or NYPD, but our roster of troopers is about 2,500 troopers that cover the state. So we're a fairly large agency. So we typically don't get a chance to work with each other during the course of our career.
Interesting. That's good to know. And Caroline K says, great thanks to your late father for his service. So I'm still trying to really wrap my head around this and the social media backlash. Like, have you ever seen anything quite like this? I mean, I think we saw a lot of it with the Murdaugh trial, but that seems to be a whole other animal that it seems to be a few levels up from this. But just talk to me a little bit how that has affected the community around this with the conjecture and the speculation.
Yeah, so we talked about how small the town of Canton is, but then even smaller the state. Word travels very quickly. You have the platform of X, formerly known as Twitter. You've got your Facebook, of course. You've got all these other brands, Instagram, and you've got the media. There's a local media channel that I provide commentary on. They've got a show now called Canton Confidential, and it airs every night when there's a trial during the course of the day, and then they'll bring in local experts in order to opine on the information that was shared within testimony. So the media's grabbed the hold of this. The individuals that have social media accounts and pushing this conspiracy narrative, and also those who are in support of the prosecution that are pushing the narrative that she's guilty, lock her up, and all those things. So it's been polarizing. It's top of news every day here in Massachusetts on all of the local news stations, some of which I contribute to. So it's been really, really interesting times. And again, as more information comes in, so does more of the social media news that gets pushed out to the masses. So again, a lot of information, a lot of dynamics, and a lot of drama attached to this case.
Yeah, sounds like it for sure. Yeah, there's individuals who are on Twitter accounts, and it's wild. I mean, I won't get into naming of these people because I don't know them from Adam. I just see posts and people getting cars and attached to certain things. I'm going, what is this? Do they have anything?
Nasty.
What's
people
that?
Are getting really nasty. People are getting really nasty over this as well.
Yeah, they are. Now, something that sticks out to me, and again, this might be a sort of loaded question or a dicey question, but do you think that a lot of this backlash that is or this aggressiveness towards Karen Reed, despite, because again, and correct me if I'm wrong, 3 federal FBI agents the federal government came in to look in this. The FBI sent people to examine John O'Keefe's body, and out of the 3 agents that inspected this, or the investigators, they said that they didn't find anything that was concurrent or congruent with a vehicular assault of any kind. But they did note things like defensive wounds on his hands, obviously damage to the skull area, but nothing on the body that suggested he was hit by a motor vehicle. Does that seem to carry any weight in this case?
It does. There was testimony maybe a couple of weeks ago regarding what the wounds on the forearm of John O'Keefe that appeared to be from a canine. Then there was testimony from the owners of the dog, the Alberts that own the dog, is that the dog was rehomed, was the term that was used. The defense was seeking, did you get rid of the dog to keep the dog from being tested and matching DNA and what have you? So that information is out there, and that information is on record within this trial. So that's another part of the forensics that I believe is going to be revisited, at least by the defense. I don't know if the prosecution is prepared to address those different injuries, but the bottom line is those injuries are fresh. They look like they were consistent with dog bites, and so that's got nothing to do with a Lexus backing up into someone that's on the side of the street. It's just a bizarre account. It's part of the record, but we'll see how all this information gets tied in. But again, the goal of the defense, and they're doing a tremendous job, is to just create that doubt, create that reasonable doubt.
So somebody was asking, I do think Jen McCabe's testimony regarding harassment was probably sympathetic to some jurors, despite her complete combativeness and inconsistent behavior between lawyers. I did watch some of her testimony. I don't know if it was from this morning or if it was from yesterday, but she does talk a lot about the massive backlash and retaliation, which I can imagine is only, I've dealt with some of this stuff in my life. I can imagine it's, infinitely worse in this case for her, to try to garner sympathy. But, I guess, is that kind of one of the angles the prosecution is trying to play up to, is that people have been attacked as well, not only Karen Reed, but now the prosecutors, people on the side of the right side of the law, if you will. Is that another one of their angles that they're probably going to be pursuing in court, or maybe they already have?
Yeah, I agree with that, Collier. You've had Jen McCabe on stand, and optics is always a big deal in front of a jury. What she did well was some of the talking heads here locally talked about her eye contact and talked about her acknowledging the jury, but not overly. So that was a good look for her. That being said, when she showed emotion, that could possibly backfire. That might not go over sympathetic to the jurors. From the perspective of, she kind of had a tis for tat with the defense attorneys. So, that bit of emotion, instead of responding calm, cool, collected, as a matter of fact, the defense came at her. And, I wouldn't want to be in her shoes. I wouldn't be the one to judge her. But, that jury is taking in every second of that exchange between her testimony and what the prosecution and defense is asking her. When you see her responding to the questions of the prosecution, there's a complete calm demeanor about herself. And then as soon as both defense attorneys, it's their turn, you can see the contempt immediately. Is that contempt something there because she's not telling the whole story? Does she have selective memory? That's what the defense is trying to do. They're trying to punch holes in her testimony to see if there's any inconsistencies. Well, you remember this fact extremely well, but yet on this other fact, you can't remember or you can't recall. So those are those areas. That's the strategy of where the defense is very effective, and really, quite frankly, giving Karen Reed proper counsel in front of this judge and jury.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And obviously, when you the prosecution, if you're the prosecution's witness, they're your friend and they coach you through everything. But you know, all the possible scenarios of what could come back at you. But it seems like, you know, her combativeness is not going to play well with the jury, because from what I watched, she seemed to be very, very defensive. And especially when, you know, or even, you know, prevaricative a lot of the time with her answers. Which begs the question, like, what else does she know, right? And you know, I guess if they can instill that reasonable doubt, then that's going to play well for Karen Reed. Now, something I was going to ask earlier is, it's interesting because I feel like even the fact that this has gone to trial without from my very limited, you know, I say this on this show a lot, you know, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not in law enforcement, I'm just a guy who's been through a lot of shit. But the thing is when I look at this, I kind of think to myself, look, if the roles were reversed and this was a man who struck a woman, would we be here? And not to play that card, but I think that begs the question in this case a little bit. What do you think on that?
Yeah, you know, the fact that you have a girlfriend, an intimate relationship, a long-time relationship between the two, Karen Reed and John O'Keefe, you have this dynamic at play where this case is taking on a life of its own. We haven't seen this provocative of a case. We've seen defendants, you know, that make televised news reports on a weekly occurrence here, like any other community in the U.S. But this one is different. And you know, the last polarizing case we had here a few months ago is we had a husband that was alleged to have killed his wife, and the body has been found. Very, very high profile case. It got similar media attention, but again, this particular
Are you talking about
case
Brian Walsh and Anna Walsh? Is that
Brian
what you're talking
Walsh,
about?
thank you. Yeah. Walsh case. Correct.
Whatever happened with him?
Correct. Yeah, same thing. I believe he's been sentenced. But again, I don't believe the body has been discovered by the wife of the wife.
Yeah, that was terrible. That echoed a lot to my mother went missing on New Year's Eve. The same thing. There were so many parallels in that I would say that case really affected me when that happened. A lot of people reached out to me and said, "Have you seen this? This is like a carbon copy." And I'm looking at this guy going, "Oh man, it's not good." So he has been sentenced. I was wondering what had happened with that. Thank you for clarifying. So I'm going to go through some of the questions here. This case, again, there hasn't been any mistress that's come out of the woodwork or a boyfriend that's come out of the woodwork or said, I mean, are there character witnesses that are coming out in defense of both John O'Keefe and Karen Reed that have said, well, you know, she had a proclivity towards violence with her ex-boyfriend, or I was her ex-boyfriend and she, you know, hit me with a car too. Has there been anything like that that's come out, or that is you know, coming out on social media?
The closest thing today that there was testimony, the relationship, I believe she was part of the Albert family. Her name escapes me, but she testified today that they were on a family trip in the Caribbean somewhere, and John O'Keefe was there, Karen Reed was there. At this moment in time, this young lady is cutting through the lobby of the hotel. She embraces John because she sees him as like an uncle to the family, and I guess Karen Reed observed kind of the end part of the hug, and then had yelled out some expletives, and that was blocked out by the watching the channel, blocked out because of the profanity. So prosecution is bringing that up. There hasn't been anything as far as a triangle love affair or anything along those lines. I haven't seen that,
but today was a good example of trying to cast her as short-tempered, in that maybe her anger was some type of motive for her to be able to use her vehicle to John O'Keefe's demise. So it's interesting. I don't know if she'll be on the stand tomorrow, but that exact point that you're bringing up came out today in some form or fashion about her state of mind.
Yeah, and I remember
Karen
there was also something that I heard where Karen Reed had approached her and said, "I want to," or the friend and said, "I want to pay for your sister's stay here. I'm so sorry I acted this way." There was something to that and that effect going on, or some of your friend's stay. So it seemed like there was contrition, and maybe she realized, like, hey, I probably flew off the handle. I'm assuming if everybody's on vacation, there's alcohol involved.
Well, part of the stop was going to the poolside bar in that exchange of testimony today. So I think you're spot on with that, Collier.
Yeah, I remember, not to divert the subject, but I remember, a friend of mine who was in AA saying to me, and he quit. Well, man, he was bad, but he said, what sobered me up is I realized my sponsor said to me, it's two things: you end up dead or in jail. That's it. Like, or in prison, not jail, because jail, you get out of jail if you can bail out. Prison, it's like, it's jail or prison for you if you keep up this lifestyle. And maybe some people should take heed of that, because it seems like there's a lot of substance abuse around these cases that or usage, at least, that leads people to make really poor decisions in the moment.
No pun intended, but sobering words of advice.
We love puns on this show, though. We love puns. So this testimony, the reasonable doubt, the not securing the crime scene, the FBI's sort of involvement, and now have they sort of washed their hands of this case, or are they still very much involved in this?
I would say they've done their preliminary investigation. They're probably in the background at this point. I also believe that there's an internal investigation by the state police on Trooper Proctor. So that we'll see if that comes into play at some point in trial, or if it will stay outside of the testimony. I can't imagine how it can't be introduced if there's something favorable to Karen Reed. So, between the state police internal affairs, the FBI's investigation, all these things are just in the background on the shelf, waiting to be presented before the jury.
What, in the case of an acquittal, let's just say, not that we're predicting either way. And again, Karen Reed is on trial. She is accused of this. She has not been found guilty, obviously. And there's a lot to this, but if it comes to an acquittal of her, and I realize that you're not a lawyer, but what kind of retaliation comes out of Team Reed regarding all of this? Like, is this not only going to be a black eye on the Canton, Massachusetts department, but also Boston PD and those involved, maybe the state troopers? What do you think there?
Great question. Yeah, respectfully, I see I see two outcomes. And again, total speculation. I'm not in the courtroom or on the jury, but I see a mistrial where there's a hung jury is synonymous with mistrial. And that then depends on if the DA is going to select a new jury and then retry the case. And I don't believe would probably have to move jurisdiction because the case has been so polarizing. So that's another layer to this. In the terms of an acquittal, neither guilty, neither innocent, everybody goes their way. I don't know if anyone could pursue defamation of character, in this case, Karen Reed, as the primary suspect in this. Defamation of character is extremely difficult to prove in a court of law. There are certain conditions that have to be met. If you don't meet all four of those conditions, you don't prove that the defamation. So I see a lot of stories. I see a lot of post media attention on this particular case. I see this taking on its own life in that realm. but less of the legalese of things in the future. That being said, she'll probably retain counsel as she becomes more public, and she has been somewhat public with some of her interviews. They've slowed down somewhat now that the trial is underway, but I could see her moving into that space of the public eye with media interviews in the like.
Is she in custody or no?
No, she's not in custody.
Okay, I didn't think so, but
Yep.
she certainly doesn't look like she's in custody. Wow. What a mess, man. What a mess. I think back to my father's trial, and not to bring it back to myself, but I do often try to use that as a point of reference when looking at these things and just thinking about like how if that had happened like now, the circus that would have surrounded it would have been with the internet, the tabloid conjecture, the online amateur sleuths. I mean, I'm assuming that that it was from go that people started, posting online about this case, right?
Well, it's interesting because, here we are in 2024, and the amount of forensic investigatory tools that exist are just massive. I mean, think about all the cell phone data that has been introduced into this trial. They were tracking the footsteps of John O'Keefe's cell phone to see if he actually entered into the house. I mean, incredible forensic tools that are available to the investigators. That's why there's no excuse to put blood samples in solo cups and to put solo cups inside of a Stop and Shop bag, a grocery bag. There's just too much sophisticated capabilities that law enforcement has its hands available to it. And if you're a small department without those resources, there's where there's multi-jurisdictional collaboration. There's a department or an agency right next door to you that can provide those resources to you. So, I wish Karen Reed the best. I have no judgment on her. I have no judgment on the prosecution, but there's no excuse for shoddy police work in this day and age where we have all these very sophisticated tools to be able to give due process to the defendant, but also to John O'Keefe. He is owed a proper investigation and for the truth to be revealed.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing too. We've focused the majority of this conversation on Karen Reed and the vitriol and sort of the case against her. But let's think about this, as the son of both the perpetrator and a victim. What about his side and his family, that if they don't get answers, I think, there was a very famous case that became extremely famous from the podcast Serial about the Adnan Syed case. And last year he was exonerated because of the prosecution just said, whatever. They just said, we're not going to pursue this. And he was released from custody, but nobody seemed to then say, even her own family was like, well, okay, so what now? Right. Like, who killed it was her brother that came out and said, who killed my sister? Like, what do you mean? Okay, so he's released. Okay, great. He we don't want an innocent man in prison, but who are you looking at now? And there's been, it's been, crickets since then. What does that look like for Officer O'Keefe's family? He has children, correct, as well, or child, correct? Or am I mistaken on that?
I think he had custody of
or a foster. He was like his brother died or something. His brother passed away, and he was mentoring and raising his nephews or whatever. Yeah, I mean, so obviously a good guy. Like, to take on that responsibility, that's a lot. You know what I mean? I have 4 nephews. I don't know how I would do in that situation, and God willing, that would never happen. But so it seems like he was an honorable person and a good person. Where is his justice? What does that look like if this doesn't happen? Do they just close the case and just say, move on? Well, okay, we screwed up, or what happens for his family?
And that's the case. Where does the justice, prevail itself in this case? It depends on where the district attorney may pivot. If the DA is going to pivot to taking charges out on someone involved in this case, again, what does that evidence look like? Right. So they've got to have something that they believe they can bring before judge and jury, and then from there try a second case in relationship to John O'Keefe's death. So it's difficult to tell. It's difficult to see where this is going to go. It appears that the district attorney has gone all in on the prosecution of Karen Read. Is there room to pivot if these allegations are not proved? Where that goes, time will only tell.
One of the things that I was wondering too, we talked about it, at the very top of this was, ring cameras and cameras. Wasn't there a camera at the house that could have recorded all this? If she had, I know I've seen some sort of surveillance looking camera with a SUV moving through frame. Is there any video evidence at this house on, what is it? 34, Fairview Road? Like, is there any surveillance footage?
There has been footage that has been introduced in the evidence that actually shows the tail lens intact in the wee hours of the morning. There are many people saying it proves her innocence, because if you're saying that she backed into John O'Keefe and there's tail lens debris within his clothing, well, again, reverse engineer, you roll the tape back that's shown on this video recording. I don't know if it's a street cam or if it's a doorbell ring camera, but it shows the tail lens intact. So again, just another area where the defense has a big gaping hole in the prosecution's case.
Wow. That's just wild.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's
things being introduced in this case that just make you scratch your head, and seeing where the police had some very, very faulty investigation at best.
Yeah, it's hard to really wrap your head around it with so many holes in the prosecution's case, how it has gotten this far. I mean, it certainly doesn't speak well to the security of, there's already issues with law enforcement to begin with now in this country. Obviously, what happened in Derek Chauvin, rightfully serving a very long prison sentence, and his co-conspirators, and in George Floyd's murder. And, but there's a lot of skepticism around law enforcement and the federal government, and, in general. And it's just, it's so bad to see something like this, because it's just going to make people think, well, can I be charged with anything if I make the wrong enemy? And, what does that look like for them? And would I have the money to defend myself if something like this happened? I'm sure this West Coast lawyer is not cheap for her. Probably worth every penny too, but I'm sure that it's a massive expense. Well,
I'll say this, Collier, that this is where law enforcement has an opportunity to do a great job and to be able to recapture the trust of our public. We owe it to the public. We're there to protect and serve. And that being said, hopefully police departments are striving towards that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. My guest today is Todd McGhee. He is a retired Massachusetts state trooper. Thank you so much for joining the program. Todd, what are you doing now? Where can my audience find you?
You can find me on my website at 508 or 508 group, 508group.com. And that's where I provide active shooter training. That's where I provide risk assessments, trying to keep our community safe.
That's wonderful. I have one more question before I let you go. So I'm curious, and you can only get one of these choices. You can only pick one. What is more likely in this scenario? That the Karen Read's trial ends in a guilty verdict, or the Boston Celtics win the NBA championship? I know that this is a difficult one too.
Well, since we spent 59 minutes or so on the Karen Read trial, let me opt for Celtics going all the way to the championship and taking it in 6 games.
Woo! Bold prediction, my friend. I love it. I love it. Todd, thank you so much for joining the program. I greatly appreciate you. I'd love to have you back. Guys, let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to have Todd back on the program, because I think he was fantastic.
Thank you, Collier. Thanks for having me.
One. Mover Nation, thank you all so much for tuning in. And just so you know, Marisol, who has been sitting here, she's asleep in her cage. She is in her little playpen. Wasn't she so good, everyone? I want to give a big shout out to you guys, my audience. We just crossed 41,000 subscribers this morning. Mover Nation is growing every day. I appreciate all of you being on this journey with me. To all of my Patreon members and YouTube channel members for the paid memberships, we do have our meet and greet this Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. I will be posting the link for that. That is on Google Meet. That's where you guys all get to meet each other. You don't just get to talk in the comments. You get to actually engage on camera, and it's a wonderful time. We all really enjoy it. We do it once a month. So please, if you wouldn't mind, if you support the program, there are links to that in the description of today's episode. Mover Nation, we get through another one. Here's the outro. Mover Nation, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to all my channel members and Patreon supporters. And for more exclusive content, behind the scenes videos, monthly VIP meet and greets, and watch parties, please consider supporting me on Patreon or by becoming a YouTube channel member. If you like this video, check out this one right here or this one right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because it helps with the algorithm. On that note, I'm Collier Landry. I'll see you on the next one. Good girl, Marisol. Good girl.